the top of the Constructors' Championship, which is currently occupied by McLaren, and quite comfortably so. They've won 5 of the first 6 races this season. They're sat on 246 points. Red Bull, so far, the only team to take a race win away from them. They're sat on 105 points. Ferrari, the only team to take a sprint win away from them. They're sat on 94 points. And weirdly enough, Mercedes, who haven't done either of those things, are actually the closest team to them in second on 141. But point being, all of them over 100 points back. At this point in the season, Sam, the answer could well be none of them. But if we're going to be optimistic and say this will be a championship fight at one point or another, in which case, who would be your pick to be the best of those 3 to challenge McLaren?
I can't believe they've managed to make it to the front of this pile after years of bouncing us and Lewis Hamilton whinging over the radio. But Mercedes have built a really solid car. It doesn't bounce anymore. George Russell and little Kimi Antonelli, also known as the man who doesn't break. They are a really great partnership. And whilst they are seemingly never outright fastest, because there are 2 of them doing a very solid job and they're able to always be there, the burglar, as Harry likes to call George Russell, and that little Italian wizard are going to be fighting for those points regularly. Every single race, they're on a podium or they're 4th and 5th all the time. They will seemingly chunk away at what the others can't do. If Red Bull had 2 Max Verstappens, well, then the world would be Red Bulls and the universe would all be about having wings. And I'm sure they'd win absolutely everything in eternity, but they don't have 2 Max Verstappens. They have a Max Verstappen and a second seat that can never be successful. And of course, you've got the likes of Ferrari who, if you remember it, decide to give team orders by not telling half the team what the orders are. So that also doesn't equate to a very good race result. Mercedes seem to be able to do nothing the best, but because they do it all right everywhere, they're the closest that they could be to McLaren. It could be a bigger freebie for McLaren if they tried realistically. Everyone else just seemingly wants to fall over their own feet, but at least Mercedes have got some consistency. They're seemingly putting in some good results, and they are starting to separate themselves from the rest of that top 4, I think, with the consistency of both those drivers. So Mercedes would be my immediate pick for who can challenge McLaren, if anyone, realistically.
Harry, would you agree with Sam, of those 3 teams, Mercedes is the best position to go and challenge McLaren?
I think so. It was just unbelievable to say. I also, by the way, Sam, I feel like that description describes us as a podcast, like just very
massively down
the middle. Can't do anything really well, but consistently okay.
How are we down the middle? We're biased towards and against every driver and team on the pitch.
Yeah, well, that's exactly down the middle. That's perfect.
No, it's not down the middle. We are biased in all directions. We are not reasonable.
Not bitter at all, not frustrating at all.
No, this is a hot Sunday afternoon. Look, Mercedes, weirdly, I think their consistency is the thing that's going to help us here. You'd say maybe ultimate lap time wise, you'd say Red Bull, but to be honest, I'm not really sure that's Red Bull. I think it's more Max Verstappen, the team, doing that. So, and Ferrari are just a shambles most of the time. So I still believe there is something in that Ferrari, but whether we're ever going to see it this year remains to be seen. I'm leading towards doubt on that one. So, Mercedes seem to be
out.
Yeah, exactly. Mercedes seem to be the challenges, but like you said, Sam, it's not like they're going to get them on ultimate pace. I think Mercedes are going to be there just on consistency. It's not going to be a huge challenge. So, yes, not like you said. You don't want to call it an open goal because everything can happen. Anything can happen in F1, but it's certainly served up on a plate for McLaren at the moment. And I mean, they're certainly utilising it with the results they're getting. But there's no real clear ultimate challenger. You have to say that Mercedes are the closest, but it's almost by default by being consistent and not really super fast. I mean, Russell's putting in some good performances. Antonelli's doing a good job as well. Obviously, the sprint pole in Miami, but by just being average, they default the next challenger, which is just a bad reflection on Ferrari and Red Bull right now.
Despite everything, and I can't believe I'm saying this, my pick is Ferrari because
you're a fool. You're a fool.
To be clear, I'm not saying this is likely or probable, but I think regardless of which of the 3 teams you pick, they all need a dramatic turnaround. Like Mercedes need a marginally less dramatic turnaround, but they're all over 100 points back. None of them are close. So I think I'm looking for which of those teams could, and I'm saying could rather than will, could have a dramatic turnaround. And we know fundamentally, and it's a weird thing to say, but Ferrari has the most fundamental flaw, which is that, ironically, they can't run their car close to the floor. And if they're able to fix that, now they've already got a massive deficit. And I think we're all in a position that McLaren, if they keep this up, it's going to be very difficult for anyone to catch them. But I think based on what we saw at the Chinese GP and specifically in the sprint race, again, using Harry's line, there's something in there.
There's something there.
Chances are they're not going to unlock it. But if there's any of those three teams that I think could make a dramatic leap, I think it is Ferrari. As good as Mercedes have been to this point, if they just keep up what they're doing, keep being consistent, they ain't going to get there. They still need to unlock pace in the car that they are yet to show. You could argue in qualifying, they showed a bit more in Miami. I know George Russell finished second in Bahrain, but they are still a long way back in most Grand Prix. Like George Russell, for example, in Miami, finishes third. Great result. He's 37 seconds back. It's a dramatic turnaround that all three of these teams need. And if I'm looking for the quote unquote easiest fix, I think it currently belongs at Ferrari. Again, I'm not predicting it. I'm not saying it's likely. But if there's one team out of the three that could make that leap, I think it might be Ferrari. Sam, in terms of Red Bull, obviously hasn't been the pick for any of us. What should give them optimism and what should not give them optimism?
Ironically, I think it's the same thing. I think it's, again, as we've mentioned his game endlessly, Max Verstappen can drive that car at a level that can make it competitive with McLaren. Not at every Grand Prix. We saw at Miami that no matter what he tried, defensive, being, pushing them around the track or not, he could not get the speed up to match what McLaren did. But, 5 out of the 6 Grand Prix, he's been there or thereabouts with McLaren. Of course, he's only got one race victory, but so has Lando Norris. So it's not like he's disastrously behind in that sense. The ironic thing here is, of course, that the biggest weakness that Red Bull have is that the entire team is built around Max Verstappen, and the car is so unique in its handling, in its incredibly over-series creation, the way it's been built up, that the way that Max Verstappen drives it on a knife edge is so hard to attain for any secondary driver that they essentially can't compete on both fronts. And this has been Red Bull's major problem since 2018, since Daniel Ricciardo left, essentially was the last time they were actually able to compete on both fronts. And even before they had the kind of Daniel Ricciardo, Max Verstappen combination, when you had Webber and Vettel, even Webber many times was struggling to be at the level of Vettel was and actually back up Sebastian Vettel. Of course, we had the 1 year that was going well for Webber where we got the famous Multi-21 Seb, and we had those very juicy and interesting team radios and moments on track. But famously, Red Bull have always been very one driver orientated, and that has caused them to struggle, and it's causing them to struggle again. So if they could make a mini Max Verstappen or clone Max Verstappen, then they would immediately be right up there with McLaren. I have no doubt that they would be scoring very, very close to what McLaren are able to do outright. That is not possible, unfortunately, for the world. And they are going to need to adapt to their car and their build and their focus to ensure that you can get 98% out of Max Verstappen, which is still better than pretty much anyone on the grid right now. But you can also get 85, 90% out of a very good driver in the second seat. So while Max is winning, that driver is third or fourth on a very regular basis. That's where Red Bull needs to sit. Yuki Tsunoda is a great driver, but he's not able to master it. Sergio Perez was a very solid midfield driver. We've always given him credit, but he wasn't able to grasp that car in Red Bull. Lawson didn't even get a sniff of a chance to really have a go at it anyway. And we've seen what happens with the previous drivers before that. So it's all, with Red Bull, it's all about building a car that has compromise, that is able to be used to a very strong degree by both sides of the garage.
Quick note to Helmut Marko, who is probably listening. Don't take too much inspiration from Sam's idea for cloning Verstappen or a mini Verstappen. She is just over a week old. You cannot take her yet. She's not ready. I never know. He might try it. So
that meme of like the guy with the guy behind him and he's reaching out to grab is it the ball or something like that? I imagine that is Max Verstappen / partner reaching out to get their child, and yet Helmut Marko is behind them, pulling away from the child. No, it is mine. My precious.
Oak helmet. Stop it.
We're not really, not that there's much to discuss, but that child has got the genes of Nelson Piquet and Max Verstappen in it.
Yeah, I think Christian Horner compared it to
Danny Kvyat.
The best of the three.
Science.
I think Horner compared Lily to a horse.
Well, that's a normal thing to do.
In the first week of your life, you're like a horse.
And I extend that to any week of any life that you shouldn't compare people to horses.
Can you imagine being the PR person for just people in Red Bull? It must be an absolute freaking nightmare. Week in, week out.
They said, what again?
What, this? A horse?
Every week.
What?
They managed
Last
to
week it was Cocoa Pops.
They're like, they'll advertise for livery designers and then they'll just move them straight into PR every time.
It's like, it's
we
PR.
actually keep it the same, guys. So off you go.
Well, that was perfectly normal. I think from Red Bull's perspective, I know they don't have Adrian Newey, who, let's be honest, wasn't that influential when it came to car design at Red Bull. They did produce a car that was very good a year ago. So it's not that long in the past that they have been able to develop a great car. Max Verstappen is obviously the reason that you would be most optimistic if you're a Red Bull fan. I've started a new count, which is headache count. So we've got Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari. How many headaches are each driver giving McLaren this season? The numbers aren't great. I would say George Russell has given one headache, which was Bahrain. Antonelli, Leclerc and Hamilton, at least in main races, 0 each. Verstappen has given McLaren a headache 4 times this year. We had him finish within 1 second of the win at Melbourne. We saw him in Japan, obviously win the Grand Prix. Saudi Arabia, I know he had the penalty coming, but he still led that race. And Miami, he was at least a factor with both McLaren drivers having to get by him. So he is constantly being more of a thorn in the side of the McLarens than anyone else quite comfortably at this stage. But I just can't, I can't see this happening. I know I said it a few weeks ago. Them winning the Constructors' Championship to me is just not even a discussion. At the moment, the second seat, which is obviously Lawson for the first 2 races, Tsunoda for the last 4, the second seat is currently contributing 1 point per race. Like at that rate, Verstappen will need over 875 points this season, I think, to win the championship. Because as I said a few weeks ago, McLaren are on course for 900 right now. And if you're doing the maths, folks, that's 35 race wins. Even in today's F1 calendar, that ain't doable.
Well, if anyone could do it, I fear it might be Max.
Yeah, maybe he's trying to get
go in the Nürburgring.
Extra points at the Nürburgring.
Yeah, it'll probably pop off to the Indy 500 for a bit as well.
Oh,
he'll go.
That wasn't Max Verstappen, though, to be fair, at the Nürburgring. That was someone else entirely.
That's very true.
Franz Hermann.
Would have fooled me.
Franz
Franz, put up Franz. Good job, Franz.
Franz Hermann.
Harry, is there a world where Red Bull can finish second this season? Like, can you see that happening?
I can see it. I think it would take some Mercedes inconsistencies to creep in. And look, going by the last few years, that could happen. Mercedes have been known to be inconsistent over the last few years. I think that might be unlikely. If Red Bull can unlock just a little bit more from this car, given what Verstappen's able to do with it now in a car we don't feel is brilliant. I mean, it's still good, still a good car, but it's not a brilliant car. And, look at the relative results of Tsunoda and obviously Liam Lawson beforehand. But if they can unlock a little bit more versus McLaren, then Verstappen is that headache counter you've got, Ben, is going to start going up a lot more. And McLaren are going to get more headaches. So I think that is a possibility, because if Red Bull can turn it around and, they're the previous Constructors champions for the past 4 years, you'd say they could. Sorry, not for the last 4 years. Before that. Sorry, McLaren. But yeah, I'd hazard a guess that they could unlock a little bit more from this car. It may well be very much centered around Max Verstappen, but at this point, probably makes sense to. So, they could get in the mix. I just think it would take a bit of a bit of a drop off from Mercedes and also some improvements from Red Bull. But like all of these teams, it's the balance now of reward this year and risk of not getting next year right, and how much do they want to invest in it. So Red Bull are in a tricky spot because I think they need to have some performance to make Verstappen stay. But also not sacrifice next year, because then if next year's bad, then he's definitely not staying. So that's a real rock and a hard place situation for Red Bull. So sorry, guys.
Bang, on your headache counter, how many have McLaren given themselves?
Oh, I lost count.
Yes, that makes sense now.
Yeah, but it's probably more than all of the other drivers combined. I think with Red Bull and versus Mercedes, I guess, and looking at that second place in the championship, it is the consistency that's currently, and not just within the drivers, but track to track. Speaking to what you really said, Sam, about how Mercedes have not necessarily been the best at anything this year, but they've turned up everywhere and been all right. Red Bull were very good in Jeddah. They were very good at Suzuka. They were not very good at Bahrain. They weren't very good last time out in Miami. If they start to find some consistency, then maybe they can make an attack on second place.